we're live with April Yates to celebrate the book launch for City of Snares, which is available today everywhere books are sold. We're excited to have her, and we're excited about the book, of course.
Yep.
So, April, thanks for joining us. Give us a plug. What else besides City of Snares you got going on?
Okay, well, my debut novella, a gothic romance called Ashfon, was available via Ghost Orchid Press last year.
Yeah.
And I have a co-written novel with Ray Knowles coming out in March, I believe, Lies That Bind, and also an anthology that we've co-edited together.
Yes, Scissor Sisters, which also comes out in January or February, I think. So
Shooting for January.
Lots going on. So usually we start the lives where we talk about my mother. And it's not a therapy session, I promise. But my mother read to us as we were growing up into our teen years every night. And, no matter how long she had worked, how sick she was, the nightly reading was something we didn't skip. And she read us all sorts of books. And I think because of that reason, when I'm reading a book, when I really start to enjoy it, the narrator in my head becomes my mother's voice instead of my own. Now, Steve will tell you our voices are similar, but I can tell the difference. Yeah. So for me, a book always becomes very meaningful and definitely gets a green light when I start to hear my mother read the story. So in City of Snares, it was very early on. It was in the very beginning opening. April does this thing where it opens like with a Hollywood ad. And so in the golden age of Hollywood, when you had all this extra, read all about it, variety news, it starts with Harry Brandt's red boarded ad in the Hollywood Reporter last month has sent shockwaves through Tinseltown with Garbo, Crawford, and Hepburn careers already taking a swan dive into the sewer, though some would argue they were already there. And there's another paragraph to it, but I love it because this kind of extra, get the gossip on Tinseltown, right. The cracked golden age, bookends the book. So it's got a great rounded effect. Now, what we haven't done before is Steve is going to read a quote. And this is what hooked him. So can you read it from there?
Yeah, let me lean in just a little bit. Every sound of the diner seemed muted, as if passing through water. The gentle sizzle of oil on the grill, the burbling of the coffee pot, even the drunk on the corner booth's muttered ramblings had taken on that faraway quality. And I love the description there in that paragraph. To me, it's really powerful. It sets a scene, and I can feel it. I can hear all that. I can place it there. And
so it's like you're there.
Yeah. And it leads into what was preceding, what's going on next. I just think it's a great job. I love the description.
And April, I think this is something that you actually really do very well in all the reading and all of the things that we've read from you, including the short story in the Gothic. I can't remember the name of our own anthology.
A quaint and curious volume of Gothic.
Yes, the quaint curious
volume of Gothic tales.
I almost, the one. Well, but you have this way of not just describing the scene, but almost like putting the reader in the scene. Right. Like, I think the reason when Steve and I talked about this quote, because I told him, I said, listen, it's great writing, but that's not a quote that would hook someone into a story. And Steve's like, you're crazy. I strongly disagree. This was our first argument about your book. He's like, I strongly disagree because I'm in the diner based on this description. I'm in the room. And I'm like, oh, well, sure. I mean, I'm in the room. Sure. But this is true of everything you've written.
And this is what I keep trying to tell Heather. Every quote that we post like that does not need to be the shadows moved behind her. She turned and screamed as her impending fate launched itself at her. It doesn't have to be. It can be a beautifully descriptive.
I'm a sensational reader. But but it's true. I mean, like, and there are several parts in the book. Like, there's a description of Diana's house that I can picture. Like, I can picture the room so vividly, down to smelling her perfume. You know, that it's so vivid and it's so descriptive. And so that leads me to my first question. When you write in general, not necessarily this book, but anything, does it start with you with the place, or does it start with a plot arc?
It very much starts with plot and characters first, and then place you know, arrives a lot later, really. So the inspiration for City of Snares was actually a few years ago watching Ryan Murphy's Feud, the Beth and Joan saga.
Yeah.
And you know, I've always been a big fan of old Hollywood. You know, whatever happened to Baby Jane, it's, you know, one of the,
excellent
you know,
film.
excellent film, excellent book.
Yes.
And you know, that, you know, got me, that just kind of set something in motion for me. And
Mhm.
it trying to, sorry, I am absolutely terrible at describing where my ideas come from, but
That's all right.
that was very much the seed of it. And you know, watching films like Sunset Boulevard, which, you know, I would very much describe City of Snares as a love letter to Sunset Boulevard. And you know, Diana is very much inspired by by Norma Desmond in that film.
Right.
She's like an amalgamation of you know, the depiction of Joan Crawford, you know, where we could argue all day whether it's accurate or not, but the of her in like films like Mommy Dearest, and
Yes.
like, you know,
Right.
it is more of a caricature than anything. But yeah,
Right.
that was very much the seed of it.
Right. Because, I mean, the thing about the golden age of Hollywood is you see all these really magnificent, I mean, not only performers, but costumes and set design. And we were talking before we went live about Philadelphia Story and Cary Grant and Katie Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart, and how they're larger than life actors. So like when they walk on the set, they fill the screen. And Katharine Hepburn, especially, I thought, had such pose, especially for poise, for a woman who Hollywood kind of treated as the ugly duckling. Like, she was the actress who made her mark based on acting, not, you know, the silver screen beauty, though I thought and think she was remarkably beautiful. But the thing about it is that it's such a magical, like when I saw the movies growing up with my grandparents, it seemed to have a quality that the movies we would go see at the theater didn't have. And I think some of it was the magic of black and white film versus color film, because you kind of got to fill in the blanks about what colors were. But the book has that same kind of quality, because the thing about it is like, if you read the history of the golden age of Hollywood, it's very seedy. Like, it's very, you know, it's almost like, you know, the Gilded Age, where you're covered in gold, but underneath it's gross. Like, it's something, it's a metal that's going to turn your skin green if you get it wet. And so, and that's what I love about the book, is the book really covers and captures that kind of bigger than life, fills a room personality with Diana. And then later, you know, one of the other characters, I don't want to do any spoilers, but
no, not at all.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I would say about your writing in general, April, is that I think you do such a great job of capturing the mood and atmosphere and feel of a place. You know, I forget the title of your short story from a quaint and curious volume, but
Show off.
But the mood, I mean, you had such a feel to that story. The atmosphere in that story was just was as powerful, if
Mhm.
not more, than the plot line itself, which also was really good.
Right.
And I fell in love with your writing with that story. And it's like, so when this came along, even before I read it, I was already, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
We're not giving the final decision yet, but
We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a preliminary yes without even cracking it.
And
So
then once we looked in here, it's like, oh yeah, absolutely.
because it's, I mean, at its root, it's like a Hollywood tell-all feel, but it's also, it really touches on like toxic relationships, when our dreams become the thing that we would sell everything about ourselves to get. And then it is sapphic horror at its most horrifying. I mean, there's really something, the feeling of losing your identity or your agency, I think, is a horror that hits home with anybody, because it's the thing that like we fear the most, maybe even unknown to ourselves until we're faced with it. And so the horror in this book kind of unfolds gently at first, because you're like, oh, what is going on? What is the story here with all the girls? Like, and it's a Hollywood book. So you're like, oh gosh, this could be anything. Like, this could be, a sex slave ring gone wrong. And Archie, what's that guy's name? The comedian, Archie Bunker?
Archie Bunker?
No, honey. The old one from black and white movies.
Oh.
Who got in so much trouble. I mean, he was a horrible person.
Right.
But
are you thinking of Bucky Bunker?
Yes, that's who I'm thinking of. That he was such a comedic genius with timing and slapstick. But boy, howdy, did he? You want to talk about the metal that turned
a very horrific story? Yes.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a perfect example of how gross the underbelly of Hollywood was at the time. But it's the same kind of, you kind of have that same kind of feel where you get the feeling like, oh gosh, if I get this hand wet, it's going to turn green. Like, this is iron, not gold.
Yeah.
So was it difficult to write the idea of losing agency or identity as you wrote the book? And again, try not to do any spoilers, but that's the type of horror. That's the type of horror it is. It's loss of identity horror.
It very is that, like the studio system as it was set up in those days, very much subsumed identities. You'd take, they'd take these girls and boys, from the Midwest, and they would just mold them, change their names, absolutely everything about their identities, their lives were micromanaged, and so it was.
And it was everything about their lives. It was micromanaged. Like, they controlled who they were seeing at dinner with, and I mean, it's just, I think it's Katharine Hepburn, but I hope I'm not getting this wrong. But there was an actress, I think it was Katharine Hepburn, that the studio did not want her to wear pants on the set, when they were running lines or checking lighting, or any of those things. And she would come out in pants, and they put their foot down, which this cracks me up now, because when you think about it now, actors show up in like sweatpants and t-shirts, to do lighting. But back then they expected the women to come out full makeup, full hair, and you didn't have to wear your costume for the scene, but you had to be dressed like a woman, in a skirt and a blouse. So Katie Hepburn came out in her underwear.
I think I have heard that story, yes.
Like did the whole lighting check in her underwear and a top. And so then the studio was like, okay, that's fine, wear pants. Because she's like, I'm not going to wear a skirt just because I'm a woman to do a light check. Like, that's stupid. And so, or a sound check or whatever they were doing. But she was just like, no, if I'm not going to wear pants, then I'm just not going to wear any bottoms. And so they relented. But I mean, I try to imagine a time, and I mean, I'm not an actor, so I don't know how much the studio still really controls. But in that time, controlling what you wore to a sound check or a light check, or a camera check, like, you're not even it's not even a pre-rehearsal of the scene. So, and I think about all the arranged marriages that came out of the golden age of Hollywood because the studio said it's time for you to be married.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, the studio said, listen, everyone in town knows you're gay, but you've got to pick up a wife because we're not going to have a gay superstar, especially with the men. Like, and I think of Rock Hudson,
Right.
you know, who they were after for so long to pick up a wife, you know, to be his beard. And I just think you have to really, like, you have to really want it. You have to really want it so badly that the chiseling away at your personhood may bother you or may irritate you, but it seems worth it. But I think you do a good job in the book of kind of paralleling that to history because it's not all of a sudden. You know, it's not all of a sign your whole life away right now. It's like a slow chip. And I think, you know, there's a lot of that. You guys, can you see the cat? It's Steve's
Tarzan's giving two paws up for the movie.
2 paws up for the book. I didn't realize it was on your lap until I saw him on the screen. But
now I kind of feel like Blofeld.
But I think that one of the things that's also just a parallel for, I think, toxic relationships more than, and that's what I like is the layers of this book, because to me, yeah, it's a Tinseltown book, but it's also when you lose yourself in an abusive relationship, it's not all at once. You know what I mean? People don't chisel you down in one big bang. It's a little tiny piece of yourself at a time.
There it is, interspersed with love bombing. You know, it's that push and pull all the time. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like it's actually a great setting to have this kind of toxicity, but also in their relationship, but also the golden age of Hollywood in the background is like the underbelly, because that too is also a toxic relationship where you're willing to chisel off a little piece of yourself at a time to make your dreams come true. And then it's the same thing. Like when you're in the studio, then when you have a successful film and you've done what they've wanted and you have a big studio wedding, you know, they're thrilled with you. Suddenly you're on the front cover of every magazine and you're invited to all of the parties, you know, that they have secured an invite for, and you're nominated for all of the awards. And, you know, you're the studio darling. And I just think that's so much like the toxic relationship of the studios in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, when they were like, it's like a love bomb. You know, it's like they tear you down, they eat a piece of your soul, and then they love bomb you, and then they start eating a piece of your soul again. And it's very much like an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And so I love how you've woven those two stories together. And but my question is, how hard is that to do, though, to layer the story on top of each other? Was that easy for you, or did you find yourself having to like make notes and come back and write in scenes?
It actually came very naturally. The way I write is I'm very much an underwriter that things come up very short, and then I go back and I add a lot and flesh out that way. Okay. And you know, pick up threads and little threads of things and think, okay, later on, you know, I can make that a little bit more apparent. I could go back foreshadowing. So it actually came very naturally. It was a story that fell together, you know, quite easily, in many ways.
That's great. Is that how you find writing so far? Do your stories kind of start with a basic outline of where you think you're going to go, and then you can go back and fill in the details, or does it change every time you write a story?
Oh, it's very much that all the time.
That's excellent. I'm always so interested between the, what do they call them, pantsers or plotters?
Right.
You know, it's so interesting to me because I would never guess right. And people are like, do you think that author is a pantser or a plotter? And I'm like, I think maybe a plotter, and they're like, oh no, I don't plan anything. I just sit down and write, we see what happens. We see if we even keep it in the book. And I'm like, all right. But now I do have a question about music for you.
Oh, yeah.
When you write, do you listen to music or do you have to be in a quiet, no background noise situation?
Okay, I cannot write in complete silence. I have to have ambient noise. So in my early 20s, I worked in retail, and so there was always noise around. But at the end of the day, you get very quiet. You're stuck at a till, and I would write on the back of the till roll.
Really?
And so, yeah. Just like these long strips of in fact, I think a little bit of those scraps actually eventually became ashforn. So I do need the ambient noise, so whether that be music, radio, just people pottering about. If it's complete silence, I just lock up. Yeah.
Can you write in a restaurant or a coffee shop?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that would be, I could listen to music and do anything, but I think, or have the TV on in the background, but I think I would constantly find myself people watching if I were out somewhere writing, but I'm a people watcher. So maybe that's just my voyeuristic tendencies.
Do you have a preference for what kind of music you listen to as you write?
Yes, it's very much 80s and 90s pop rock. Bit of 70s.
Gen X rules.
Yeah, the 70s was the greatest rock and roll, and I'm going to probably get lynched for saying that.
Mm-hmm. We may have to edit some of your stuff out. But yeah, that's really interesting. So I think that, hold on, I've lost my train of thought. Just give me 1 second because I'll catch it in a minute.
Well, while you're getting that, I was going to say that is one thing I admire when people can actually write to music, especially when it's music that has lyrics and singing in it, vocals. If I try to write like that, I almost always end up writing part of the lyrics into whatever I'm writing. And then when I go back and look, I've written half of Mother's Little Helper by the Stones.
I said they Rolling Stones.
Let's excise this back out.
Right. That's a copyright nightmare.
Yeah.
I find it's easier when it's a familiar song. And if it's a familiar song, it does just blend into the background. If it's something new, then it's like, like, what's this? And then that does draw the attention away. But if it's if it's like an artist I'm very familiar with, it just becomes background noise. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that what I was going to say is, as I was reading this, I often listen to music while I read. And I think part of that is my ADHD. Like I have to have two running things happening at the same time so I can settle in and concentrate. I found myself constantly flipping through my playlist for big band music. And I think it was because of the setting of the book. I didn't really put it together. Yeah. I didn't put it together until I was making a TikTok video. And I kept listening to big band and I was like, what is wrong with me? I mean, like, I know the decades match up, but what is happening? And, but I think it's because I had listened to big band while reading the book. So like now it's stuck in my head, and it's a big band only while reading this book. So, but if you listen to music while you read, I can make you a playlist recommendation of big band songs and swing music to listen to while reading. But I do think that music and reading go very hand in hand for me. So I'm always interested in the authors that are like, no, it has to be stone cold silent, or I've got to have the music on loud enough that I can't hear somebody knock on the door because I've got to lose myself, in the sound. So even when Steve edits, it has to be like
quiet,
mouse quiet. He's like, I have to, this is what he said. I have to listen to the words and then I'll patiently wait to see if he's going to read it out loud, which he does not. And I'm like, do you mean listen to the voices in your head? Or what are we listening for? I don't want to be quiet anymore. So
yes, I constantly have a narrator when I'm reading going in my head, and it's like, yeah, if I'm playing music, that disrupts that.
That
And
disrupts
like,
the narrator.
Yeah,
My narrator can handle all sorts of background noise. No worries. But this is why Steve and I have separate offices. You know, during the pandemic, when Steve came home to work, we were in the same office because I've always worked from home because of the kids. And so we shared an office for, I think, 3 days. And Steve goes,
and after
I don't know what we're going to do.
After the 45th time of listening to David Bowie's The Life and Times of Ziggy Stardust over and over, I'm like, okay, I'm going upstairs to work.
Yeah. David Bowie is always my hard, I got to do something hard music. So, but actually what he really said that he's too kind to say is, Heather, is there any point where you don't talk out loud as you're working? And I'm like, no, I narrate my whole life out loud. So that's how I got moved upstairs during the pandemic we converted our dining room into my office. So, and that's, now you're upstairs in an office space, and I am in the dining room again. No matter where we live, we convert the dining room into my office. But I need the chaos. You know, like the back door, the front door's right behind me, the kitchen's right to my left. Like I need the constant noise to do anything, even to relax. I hate to admit out loud, but I think part of that's my personality, and part of that's having so many kids in the house for so long. Yeah.
Now, you know, one question I see a lot of authors get asked, and I'll go ahead and throw this out here at you too today. As you're writing, and we'll look at this book, but do you see bits and pieces of yourself in the different characters?
You don't have to answer this question.
If it's personal, no, not personal stuff.
We'd like to know how much of the toxic relationship is autobiographical, April. Well, I mean, I'm just saying.
I guess I can say that I'm soon to be divorced, so I can leave it at that.
Enough said. I understand. That's a doozy.
Well, no,
I know people always ask it. People always say how much of this is autobiographical, but I never ask an author that because I'm afraid if I ever wrote anything, it would be all autobiographical.
No, I don't ask so much that as more of a general sense. Do you see yourself in the characters you write? Not for any specifics or anything.
Not the person who's poisoning the other person.
Right.
Though I did tell Steve today I was going to poison him when we were old. He then said, yeah. So, okay, well, April, I think, do you have any more questions?
Well, you've talked a little bit about some of the other upcoming projects. Do you have any other novels, stories?
Are you working on a new one?
Things you're dreaming of writing?
Okay. Well, I have to admit, writing has been on the back burner for a little while for me, but I'm starting to get back into it now. And I do have a Regency set mermaid story.
Wow. That'll be exciting. Is that going to be a novella, or is it a short story, or is it to be determined?
Maybe novella, maybe novel. I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay, so somewhere between the two. That's excellent. We'll have to keep our eyes out for that. I love the Regency period too.
Absolutely.
And mermaids.
Me too.
Okay, so I think if it's all right with you, do you have a passage that you're happy to read for us?
Yes, I do believe we settled on the first chapter.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. No nervous. Okay. Chapter 1. Trudy Tutler's Tinseltown. Box office poison. Harry Brandt's red bordered ad in the Hollywood Reporter last month has set shockwaves through Tinseltown, with Garbo, Crawford, and Hepburn careers already taking a swan dive into the sewer, though some would argue that they were already there. Now, with word on the lot that Diana Blake's newest picture has been placed indefinitely on the back burner, it seems that there is no antidote available to counteract Brandt's poisonous words. Fuck off. This from the drunk in the corner. He didn't seem to be talking to anyone in particular. His arms sprawled in front of him and head resting on the table, a small puddle of spittle pooled beneath his mouth. None of this had registered with Hazel, because sat at the table was Diana Blake, and she was even more captivating in the flesh than Hazel could ever have imagined. Every sound of the diner seemed muted as if passing through water. The gentle sizzle of oil on the grill, the burbling of the coffee pot, even the drunk in the corner booths muttered. Ramblings had taken on that faraway quality. Are you going to stand there all night, or are you going to see what the broad wants? Louis, the fry cook, asked Hazel, not unkindly. It was 3 a.m, and by the disinterest Louis was showing, he could not have recognised Diana. True, she wore minimal makeup, and her normally elegantly coiffed hair was loose, reaching to her shoulders. Still, Hazel would have recognised that face anywhere. Had spent her life transfixed by it ever since she was 5 years old, and her father had taken her to the Picture House Cinema in her hometown, a town 5,000 miles and a lifetime away now. As Hazel walked over, for the first time ever, she was painfully aware of the wrinkles in her uniform shirt. She held a notepad in front of her apron, attempting to hide the coffee stains. She served other stars of the silver screen, but never had she felt as nervous. Granted, none had been Diana Blake's caliber. What can I get for you, Miss Blake? Hazel said, feeling rather proud of how casual she sounded. Diana took a drag of her cigarette, her eyes narrowed and fixing upon Hazel. Heat rose on the back of her neck as if she had committed some terrible faux pas. Was Diana attempting to be incognito, and she'd ruined it by announcing her name to the admittedly empty diner? Finally, Diana said, "You're new here." "I've been working here for 3 months going on." She held up her hand, cutting Hazel off. "I didn't mean." Diana paused for a beat before making a sweeping gesture with her hands, the glowing end of her cigarette moving perilously close to Hazel's bare arms. "Here, I meant America, this town. I came over just 5 months ago from," Hazel began. "You have no family here?" Diana talked over, her eyes locked upon Hazel's as she did. "Yes, no family." Diana couldn't possibly be genuinely interested, Hazel thought, but could think of no other possible reason why she'd be asking these questions. "How old are you?" 22. Diana's gaze left Hazel's eyes fixating on a point behind her. Should I leave? Give her more time to think, Hazel thought. Evidently, she's lost interest in me. "I want a coffee, black. And when you bring it to me, you're going to sit down and talk to me." "That's really very kind of you, but I don't think I ought to whilst I'm working." Diana looked around. The drunk in the end booth gave a soft snore, whilst Louis, engrossed in one of the many pub westerns he kept behind the counter, wouldn't have noticed if a grease fire started. "I'm sure you taking a 5-minute break won't make the whole joint descend into chaos." "No, I suppose it won't." She walked back to the counter and poured Diane's coffee. Louis didn't even glance up from his book. Hazel debated whether to pour a second cup for herself. Too presumptuous? Hazel returned to Diana's table, placing the solitary cup in front of her before sitting down. "So," Diana said, lighting up another cigarette, the tip of which Hazel noticed was red rather than the usual cork. "I can see from your tag that your name is Hazel, and you obviously know who I am, so we needn't bother with formal introductions." She pushed the coffee cup towards Hazel. "Drink that. You look dead on your feet, and I need you to pay attention to every word. I can think of only one reason a pretty young thing would travel all the way from—" She stopped here, and Hazel could only assume that she was waiting for her to fill in the blank. "Edenton." Diana looked blank. "It's a little village in England, that. And that's to be a star. Beyond the arm of one, or both?" "I could think of a dozen or so other reasons," Hazel said rather waspishly. It irked her to be thought of as being so shallow, so vapid. "I'm sure you could." Diana smiled for the first time, putting Hazel at ease. "Tell me truthfully now, Hazel. Do you want to be in pictures?" "Yes." Was that the truth? Her thought was interrupted by more of the drunk's incoherent ramblings. "Bloody Nora, what's he blarting about?" Hazel muttered. "What kind of talk is that? It's unrefined, is what it is. Marks you as low class, but," Diana took a deep drag, "we can fix that. I want you to meet me tomorrow night at Florentine Gardens. Do you need $1.50 to get in?" Hazel nodded yes. She made 30 cents an hour at the diner, and nights like these tips were hardly forthcoming. "That won't be a problem. Normally I wouldn't be caught dead there, such a tawdry place. But for you, I'll make an exception. It's a shame I had to see you here first, but we'll fix it." "I don't understand." "Lana Turner may have been spotted drinking a malt at a drugstore counter, but that's not going to work for you. Makes for a much better story for Francis to discover you there, rather than here. Florentine Gardens is perfect. has that shallow glamour, but it's still accessible to Jane Doe dreaming of being a star. Diana flicked her cigarette end into the still full cup before standing and casting that appraising gaze upon her again. Yes, I think you'll do very well. I'll be there around 9. Don't worry about finding me. I'll find you. Here. Diana produced a $10 bill and, stepping close enough to Hazel so she could feel her breath on her neck, tucked the note into her breast pocket. Yes, Diana whispered. This will do very nicely. Then she was gone. Had you asked her after, Hazel would not have been able to tell you how long she spent staring at the door, waiting to see if Diana would return. But she would have told you it was until the drunk in the corner started shouting for coffee.
It's an excellent beginning. It's an excellent beginning.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you've already got the seeds, right? Because Diana's already like clawed onto the fact that she's from out of town. She's got no family or friends. You know, it makes her an easy mark for a predator. And so I just love it. I just love it because it already starts the kind of star-studded glam, like Rita Hayworth. If she had walked into a diner for a cup of coffee, you know, the waitress probably would have tripped over herself, you know, to bring it to her. So I love the setup and I love the feeling. I think it's so much fun. So if you love Golden Age Hollywood, it's kind of got that Golden Age Tinseltown, extra read all about it.
With the rock underneath.
Yeah, and it's so much more than that. It's sapphic horror at its best, I think. And as you know, that's a subgenre that I'm really interested in. I feel like it's finally, I mean, I don't know how many are really getting through to the big 5, but I feel like it's just a matter of time. You know, because there's so many people writing it and there are so many people who want it. You know, so it's
and just adding on to what you were saying already, it's such a powerful story and works on so many different levels too. I mean,
it's a great story.
It's your Hollywood story. It's, as you said, it's the sapphic horror. It's the loss of identity horror.
Right. Toxic relationship. It's got it all. It's got it all. It's the best. Slowly losing yourself to a dream, because really, and I mean, this is very true, especially in America. How many of us sell our souls to our job, you know, and you don't even realize it. You wake up at 50 years old and you're like, oh, wait, I was only going to do this for 5 years after college. How did this come my whole career? So it's got the whole feel. So City of Snares, congratulations, April. We're so excited that you trusted us with your manuscript. It's a great novella. It's a quick read and it's just fabulous. And afterwards, you're going to want to watch all the Cary Grant and Rita Hayworth films you can find. So just prepare yourself. Like, this is going to lead you down a whole rabbit hole, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just be careful when you learn swing dancing, because it can be dangerous.
The final thing I'd like to throw at you, April, before Heather goes into our wrap up, is there anything you'd like to say to your readers, to your fans out there?
Well, just thank you to anyone who does take the time to read it. There is so much great horror in, you know, out there now with the explosion in indie publishing. So, you know, being read is like, thank you.
Thank you for anybody who even puts it on their TBR list. Because I gotta tell you,
even if you buy it with full intentions of reading, there's just so much great stuff out there.
Right. My TBR is getting embarrassing. Like Steve, I have a pile by the bed, and it. See a roll of eyes in the background, and it will topple. Like, I just keep putting books on it, and it will topple. Always at like 3 a.m, one of the cats tips the pile, or the books just finally fall. I mean, one of the two. And it wakes Steve up out of a dead sleep, and it takes us quite a while to go back to bed. And then he'll quietly move my pile into the library and put them on a bookshelf. But I have now one whole, not just a shelf, but one whole case that is TBR. So listen, I get it. I'm going to die and be buried with all the books I haven't read, in hopes that I can pick them up through the afterlife journey. But Well, April, thank you for taking, I know it's late there, so thank you for staying up late.
Thank you for
So
having me.
get home from our day jobs. And we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. And guys, you can find City of Snares anywhere books are sold. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm going to say Waterstones.
Should be, yeah.
I like to combine the Blackwells and Waterstones into one bookstore,
Right.
so I often get the name wrong, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
Waterstone, not Waterwell.
right, and also bookshop.org. If you don't have an indie bookstore in your neighborhood, you can always order for bookshop.org, and they will. Part of the proceeds goes to either a local, a non-local bookstore that you choose, or they'll choose one for you. So it's a great opportunity to support indie bookstores at the same time. So that's my plug.
Well, thank you very much, April. It was
Thanks,
good
April.
being with you here
Thank
today.
you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye, guys.